Let me tell you a story. So it's a story about a strategy, an approach, philosophy, one that I've been thinking a lot about. And it starts with a guy that maybe you haven't heard of. His name's Dave Brailsford. And to set the stage for this, I want to tell you a little bit about British cycling. So about 15 years ago, early 2000s, British cycling hires this guy named Dave Brailsford. And at that point, for the last 100 years, British cycling had been incredibly mediocre. So they brought Brailsford in and they said, "What's your plan for changing this?" And he said, "Well, I believe in this philosophy that I call the aggregation of marginal gains." And the way that he described it is the 1% improvement in nearly everything that you do. They started with a bunch of things that you would expect a cycling team to start with. So for example, they put slightly lighter tires on the bike. They got a more ergonomic seat for the riders to sit on. They had their outdoor riders wear indoor racing suits because they were lighter and more aerodynamic. But then they did a bunch of things you wouldn't expect a cycling team to do. So they split tested different types of massage gels to see which one led to the best type of muscle recovery. They taught each rider how to wash their hands to reduce the risk of infections so they wouldn't get a cold. They also figured out the type of pillow that led to the best night's sleep for each rider and then brought that on the road with them to hotels whenever they were competing. And Brailsford said, if we can actually do this, right, if we can execute on all these little 1% improvements, then I think we can win a Tour de France within 5 years. He ended up being wrong. They won it in 2 years, and then they repeated again the third year with a different rider. And then after a 1 year break, they won 2 more. So they've won 4 out of the last 5 now, have gone to British cyclists. But it was at the Olympics in London in 2012 when this kind of strategy really came to fruition. They won 70% of the gold medals available. This idea that small improvements, tiny habits, little choices are not just a cherry on top of our performance, not just like a nice thing to have, but actually can be the key that unlocks significant success. And one way to think about it is just kind of basic math. Like if you just look at the numbers, if you were able to improve by 1% each day for an entire year, and those gains compound, you would end up 37 times better at the end of the year. And if you were to get 1% worse, you would whittle yourself almost all the way down to 0. Everybody wants a transformation, right? Everybody wants a radical improvement, we want rapid success, but we fail to realize that small habits and little choices are transforming us every day already. That these times when you make a choice that is slightly better, slightly worse, a little mistake or a small error, 1% better or 1% worse, that these things compound over time. One of my favorite things about noticing, one of my favorite strategies for discussing it, is called implementation intentions. And there are hundreds of studies on this, over 100 studies on implementation. One of my favorite studies is about exercise. And they had 3 cohorts in this study. So they have first cohort, they said, I just want you to track how often you work out over the next few weeks. Second group, they said, we want you to track how often you exercise, but we're also gonna give you a motivational speech presentation, talk about the benefits of heart health, why habits are good for you, and so on. So this is the motivated group. Third group, they got the same presentation, so they're equally motivated, and then they did one thing differently. And that one thing was they filled out this sentence. They said, during the next week, I will partake in at least 20 minutes of vigorous exercise on this day, at this time, in this place, right? They specifically stated their intention to implement the behavior. Here's what happened. First group, 1 out of 3 of them worked out. Second group, motivation did nothing. As soon as they left the researcher's facility the next day, they weren't motivated. But the third group, the group that had a specific plan for how they were gonna implement the behavior, 9 out of 10 of them worked out. So you can increase your odds of success 2 to 3x just by having a specific plan. And this is the insight. Many people think that they lack motivation when what they really lack is clarity. They think that they need to get more motivated, that they need willpower in order to execute on a habit. If I just felt like writing, if I just felt like meditating, if I felt like working out, then I would do it. But in fact, they don't have a plan for it, and so they wake up each day thinking, I wonder if I'll feel motivated to write today. I wonder if I'll feel motivated to work out today. But instead, you can take the decision making out of it by explicitly stating when, where, and how you want to implement the habit. One of the most overlooked drivers of habits and human behavior is our physical environment. Thankfully, you don't have to be the victim of your environment, you can also be the architect of it. You can decide to design something to make your good behaviors easier and your bad behaviors harder. So, when it comes to habits, if you want to practice your guitar more frequently, put it right in the middle of your living room so you run across it all the time. If you want to read more, when you make your bed in the morning, take the book you want to read, put it on top of the pillow. When you come back that night, pick it up, read a few pages, go to sleep. For me, I used to buy apples all the time, and then I would put them in the crisper at the bottom of the fridge, and they would sit there for 3 weeks and go bad, and I'd finally open it up and see them again and get mad. And then eventually, I bought a bowl and put it right in the middle of the counter, and so then when I buy apples, I put them there, I see them every day, and now I eat them all the time. Many of our desires are simply shaped because we have an environment that shapes us in that way. So the moral of the story is I've never seen someone stick to positive habits in a consistent fashion in a negative environment. Maybe you can overpower it once or twice, maybe you can have the willpower to do the right thing on one day, but if you're constantly fighting against those forces, it's going to be very hard to follow through. Don't rely on willpower and self-control. It's a lot easier to stick to better habits when you're presented with better options. So quick story here. There's this professor at the University of Florida. He's retired now. He was a photography professor. His name's Jerry Ulisman. And at the beginning of the semester, he would have this film photography class, and he'd bring the class in, and he would split them into 2 groups. And he said, everybody on this side of the room, you're going to be graded on the quantity of work that you do this semester. And everybody on this side of the room, you're going to be graded on the quality of work that you do this semester. And he further explained it by saying that for your film photography, you're going to be responsible for having 100 pictures. If you do 100 photos over the course of the semester, that'll be an A. If you do 90, it'll be a B. If you do 80, it'll be a C, and so on. So it's quantity. For this group, you only have to produce 1 photo, but it has to be the most perfect photo that you can make, the best photo that you can make. An interesting thing happened. At the end of the term, all the best grades came from the quantity group, not from the quality group. And what ended up happening was that while people were busy experimenting, making mistakes, learning how to play with composition and so on, they would come across a really great photo. And while the quality group was busy theorizing about what perfection would look like and how to take the perfect photo and not actually honing their skills, they ended up only making something mediocre or average. And the important insight here, especially for habits, is that in the beginning, the most important thing is just to shut up and put your reps in. Any outcome that you wish to achieve is just a point along the spectrum of repetitions. And this brings us to an interesting point, which is that if getting your reps in is incredibly important, then that means learning how to start is incredibly important, because each repetition, really any consistency with the habit, is just an exercise in getting started each day. If you can get started over and over again, then that's what consistency is. What I like to say is you should optimize for the starting line, not the finish line. Right? So often when we think about habits, goals, routines, achievements, it's all about the milestone. We think about how much weight we want to lose, how much money we want to earn, how many subscribers we want to have. It's all fixed on the finish line. But instead, if you can optimize for the starting line and make it as easy as possible to get started and get your reps in, often the outcomes just come as a natural result. The only reason that we repeat behaviors is because we enjoy them, because we like the reward. If we don't enjoy the experience along the way, we're unlikely to stick with it. And that means that you need to figure out ways to bring a reward into the present moment, because good habits have a problem. And that problem is that for good habits, the immediate consequence is there. There's a cost that happens in the moment, but the reward is often delayed. If I go to the gym now, it's cost me time and energy and effort, but the reward is I'll be fit 3 months from now or not get sick 10 years from now or so on. The reward is delayed. Bad habits are often the reverse. If I eat a donut right now, the benefit is it tastes great and I get a hit of sugar and it's awesome, and the consequence is delayed, right? I get overweight 3 weeks from now or 3 months from now or so on. Best way to change long-term behavior is with short-term feedback. There are many ways to do this, but I'm just going to share one today. I like to call it the Seinfeld strategy. And the story is from Jerry Seinfeld, famous comedian. Early in his career, he's speaking at a comedy club. He's presenting or performing that night. And this guy named Brad Isaac is opening for him. And backstage, Brad Isaac catches Seinfeld and he said, "Mr. Seinfeld, huge fan of yours. Do you have any tips for a young comic? Do you have any recommendations for how to be better?" And Seinfeld thought for a second. He said, "Well, the secret to being a better comedian is to write better jokes. And the secret to writing better jokes is to writing every day. So here's what I think you should do. Get a wall calendar where you can see every day of the year mapped out on it. And then any day that you do your task of writing jokes for 15 minutes, I want you to just put an X on that day. And you'll have a couple false starts here and there, but at some point you're going to get a little bit of a chain going, right? You get 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days in a row. And at that point, your only goal becomes to don't break the chain. Doesn't matter how good or how bad the jokes are, doesn't matter if it makes it into your material, just don't break the chain. And what's interesting about this is that by measuring your progress, you get an immediate reward in the moment, right? The reward of like having a great stand-up routine 40 days from now or 40 weeks from now or whatever, is not, it's so delayed that you need something in the moment that makes you feel good. So if you do those 15 minutes, you can cross that off. That's a way to get an immediate hit, a little bit of a reward by tracking it. Now, I like to add one more thing to this, which is never miss twice. So many people, they'll get a chain going and then they fall off track and they feel bad about it. They feel like, oh, I ruined it. I had this great thing and now it's over. The streak is gone. But what you find when you look at top performers is not that they don't make mistakes. They make mistakes just like everybody else, but they can just get back on track more quickly. And in fact, if you could just adhere to this one rule, never miss twice, then you would, even if you fell off track every single time after you got back on track, you still would do it 50% of the time.